In my final comparison project, I chose to compare NavaPlan, eMoney, and MoneyGuide Pro. And to begin, I'll just give a brief little description of each and talk about how I think they might be applicable to advisors in practice. And so to begin, NavaPlan being a cash flow-based software system, when working with it, I noticed that it provided lots of opportunities to input very detailed client income and expenses as well as taxes. And I believe that NavaPlan can be an especially beneficial tool for advisors to use, specifically in long-term type client planning and determining specific numbers and outcomes, such as how much one might need for retirement. And really, I think what's one of the most important features of NavaPlan is that the detailed analyses that it provides for cash flow and taxes can really help it go above and beyond eMoney and MoneyGuide Pro in producing a very detailed and accurate final result to give to the client. And moving on to eMoney, eMoney is similar to NavaPlan in many ways, but it is a comprehensive financial planning software that's goals-based and cash flow-based. And the goals-based scenarios can be done very in-depth or very simplistic. It's just up to the advisor. And even though the cash flow is not quite as deep as NavaPlan, it still gives the advisor plenty of detail and in-depth goal planning. And perhaps one of the most notable features of eMoney is the in-depth goal planning that you can do. And there are 3 different goal planning portals that I'll talk about later on in the video that I think really separate it and make it go above and beyond these other 2 softwares as far as goal planning goes. And last but not least, MoneyGuide Pro is a goals-based planning software platform that's primarily used for advisors working with clients who are in the accumulation phase. And while this software system isn't cash flow based, it may not produce as accurate of results as eMoney and NavaPlan, but it still has a great purpose, and it can really be used for rough estimates or many other simplistic purposes that I'll touch on later in the video. The next thing I'd like to discuss is the ease of use compared to the level of detail in each software program. And I think this really just comes down to a matter of personal preference. I know for me, specifically, when using NavaPlan, I thought it was pretty easy to use for the level of detail, honestly. And I think it's really just because I had an easy time navigating through the software. I was able to locate everything and really just do it with very little difficulty. But with eMoney, I found it to be a little bit harder. I know it does have a lot of information and detail to navigate through, and for navigation purposes, I think that it was a little more difficult just to use because of all the different variations of things that you can do within the software. And lastly, MoneyGuide Pro, as you can probably expect, it's very easy to use for the amount of detail, I think, and it's very user-friendly and easy to navigate through. I'd now like to move into discussing whether or not each plan is broad or narrow in terms of its capability and versatility. And to start off, I would say that NavaPlan is broad. And just to revisit what I had mentioned earlier, with NavaPlan being so focused on its cash flow analysis and tax analysis, I really think that is the key piece that encompasses a comprehensive financial plan, and therefore it will be broad and accurate because it focuses on the cash flow analysis and tax implications. And I think this can be used very well in long-term planning and short-term planning because of the accuracy that it's going to provide with the cash flow and tax analysis. In eMoney, on the other hand, or similarly, is broad in nature because similar to NavaPlan, it's going to focus on the cash flow analysis and tax analysis, but it's going to have more of a concentration on the goals-based planning. And I think this is what separates it from Navaplan, and also what is going to make eMoney a broad tool to use in the profession. And it's that you can basically tailor any of the goals to your client's exact needs. And I think that's why eMoney can be very great for complex client needs. And I'll make that argument for Navaplan as well. But with eMoney, you can visit the goals portal and plan specifically for a client's retirement funding, education funding, estate planning, and cash flow analysis, which just encompasses the whole picture of a comprehensive plan. So again, that's why I think it's very broad in nature. And I'll go into Money Guide Pro next and say that I do think it's narrow, given that you can do quite a bit with it in the goals planning. The biggest setback in that is that it doesn't rely on a cash flow analysis, so it's probably not going to be 100% accurate, or as accurate as eMoney or Navaplan, just because it doesn't rely on that cash flow analysis, and that can alter the plan results. So with Money Guide Pro, I think it can really be best utilized for clients in the accumulation phase, as I had mentioned previously, because you're looking at more of a ballpark type number and estimate. And I think when you put that to use with maybe long-term planning, or for client prospect meetings, or clients with a low net worth, that's where it will be best utilized because of that. But again, it's just because it's narrow doesn't mean it can't be utilized, and I think it can be. Each one of these systems has features that will help an advisor excel in their practice. And now I'd like to talk a little bit about why each one of them would help the firm in the case write-up excel. And so with Navaplan, I really foresee it being used in comprehensive planning needs with an emphasis on cash flow and tax savings. And I could really see this being used for higher net worth clients who have more complex planning needs, because you will be able to help them with tax savings, which are the single greatest expense that they are trying to avoid most likely, and you will be able to provide them with accurate projections for the future. And with eMoney, I also foresee this being used in comprehensive planning with clients that have complex planning needs. And I don't see this specifically being used for high net worth clients, but really for all clients, because of just the availability of your ability to tailor the goals for each and every client, because I think that can really play to the advantage of the advisor and every client. And for Money Guide Pro, I'm going to say that this really is best utilized for giving rough estimates and things of that nature, and in my opinion should be used for planning needs over long-term horizons. And this may be better for lower net worth clients because it doesn't operate on the cash flow basis, and isn't taking into account the cash flow and tax planning needs and things of that nature. And for that reason, it might also be a useful tool to present something quick and concise to a client prospect. When identifying the strengths and weaknesses of each software system, there are a few that come to mind that I'd like to point out. And starting with Navaplan, one of the greatest strengths of Navaplan is that it provides very accurate and in-depth analyses based on cash flow and tax. And because of this, I really think that Navaplan has the capability of allowing the advisor to provide the most accurate, detailed report and results to present to the client with complex planning needs or very specific needs. And with eMoney, I would say that its greatest strength is that it is user-friendly. And from the advisor's perspective, It's user friendly in the way that if you simply sit down and take the time to learn it, it will become much more easy to navigate, and you'll find great use and efficiency out of all of the tools that it offers. And from the client's perspective, having access to the client portal can be really useful in the client advisor relationship, because you can have access to various documents that the advisor can give you, and you even have the ability to input some of your own information, which can be very helpful. And lastly, with eMoney, I would say that its greatest strength is simply that it's quick and easy. And when it's quick and easy, you can accomplish its purpose of providing a ballpark type number, and it will be perfectly fine to be presentable to a client under various circumstances. And as far as the weaknesses go with NavaPlan, because it is operating on a cash flow basis, the work that you're going to have to do will probably be pretty tedious, especially if you don't have access to various integrations that you may need for any given client. You'll just be spending a lot of time-consuming effort inputting data. And with eMoney, I would say that its biggest drawback is simply the fact that when you're working with investment portfolios, you can't enter the total market value of a given fund. You have to enter in the number of units or shares owned of this particular fund. And this can be pretty time consuming, especially if you don't have a statement from the client that specifically says the amount of units for each fund owned. And lastly, with MoneyGuide Pro, because it does not operate on a cash flow basis, it can have tendencies to produce inaccurate projections. But again, if you're using it simply for a ballpark type guess, this is why it's widely used in practice. I think that that's perfectly fine. But when it comes to the deficiencies and recommended improvements of these three, I would first of all say that NavaPlan doesn't offer quite the documentation storage that eMoney does, and simply allowing a greater capacity for documentation storage can really boost the use and efficiency of that program. And with eMoney, I think that one of the biggest fixes could be allowing the advisor to enter the total market value for stocks and bonds. And lastly, with MoneyGuide Pro, I think that making it faster will increase efficiency for the advisor and just make it less time consuming in all of the efforts. And last but not least, when it comes to selecting the best fit of software systems within the firm, I'm going to have to go with NavaPlan first. I think that this would be the best fit overall for the firm, just because of the accuracy that it can provide in the results given to the client. And next, I would select eMoney. And I think eMoney is a very close second, just because of all of the different planning options you can have within the goal portal, and that you can tailor it to all of the client wants, needs, and goals. And last but not least, I would say that MoneyGuide Pro comes in third, because I'm not going to say that it's up there with satisfying the needs of complex planning needs, but it can certainly be utilized in many different ways. All of these plans cost a pretty good amount of money, so as an advisor, it's important to sit down before purchasing them and make sure that you think that you're going to get your money's worth for each of them before proceeding. And so that's what I'd like to talk about next. NavaPlan will cost about $2,900 annually per person, and I'll just jump to the conclusion and say that it's worth the money. And similarly, ePlan will cost about $2,400 annually, and I also think that this will be worth the money. And MoneyGuide Pro will cost about $750 per person annually, and I'm going to hold off on this one and say that it may be best to allocate your funds elsewhere for software systems when using NavaPlan and eMoney, because I think you can get pretty much the same results that you could with MoneyGuide Pro with eMoney, in terms of making something clear and quick to present to a client who's either a client prospect or just one with no complex planning needs, I think that e-money would do the job.